Okay, should we start a little bit earlier so that you can jump to the next session? Great, perfect. So welcome everyone to this very nerdy JavaScript session. Are you aware of the fact that we're a visual analytics tool, right? So, I mean, most of the stuff we're doing is drag and drop, but the session you just jumped in is that. Well, that's good. Keep the passion high. We definitely need that. Because it feels like we're all of the same kind in the room. And with that, I don't mean this, I mean that. And with that said, there are a couple of housekeeping rules. Who of you attended like one of the sessions of Jackson and myself in the last couple of years? Not too many, okay, but some. So first and foremost, there is crowd participation required. So we might code in front of you. So therefore, if there are any typos, that's not our fault, just to make sure. On the other hand side, like you've already did that, if you like things, you're allowed to clap. And if you're feeling like comfortable with going crazy, like Steve Ballmer, that's fine as well, right? So let's get to our session flow. What are we going to cover today? But before that, we want to ask you the question of why are you here? Maybe the reason for that is because of you really love the title, okay? But that's like more of the marketing side of that. I hope you all read the description because that's really what we want to cover. But we want to let you take 3 things out of the session. First, we really want to save you time. So we actually show you how to start with the JavaScript API if you're not already familiar with that. And if you are, you definitely see some things you really like. Secondly, we want you to stay in the flow of work. And I will show that by making sure that you're understanding the difference of extensions and the JavaScript API. And last but not least, we're sharing many different ideas of customers and some inspirational demos, which you should take back home and implement them into your business, which is probably slightly different to the stuff you're seeing today. Okay, my name is Timo Tautnan. That's how I looked like when I joined Tableau. That's how I look now. So that was yesterday in the evening. I'm working in the analytics industry since 10 years. I started at IBM. I've been a standard reporting specialist at the beginning, and I became an analytics architect before I really got to like the bright side of analytics and joined Tableau. Back in 2014, I was creating a blog which is called tableaufence.com. If there's nothing you can take out of the session, please remember that one. And just so that you know, yesterday we were having like way too less space, like even less space than today. And so I was asking like the organizers, like how do we choose which room we're taking? And of course that's data driven. So first and foremost, if you're liking sessions like prior to TC, that's like the first indicator. And secondly, once we release the app and you start to putting sessions into your own like content you want to see, that's the second indicator. So next year, I will make sure that I post the session we're going to have on Tableau Fence so that you're jumping directly to the link, like it, and that we get a larger room with way more geeks. Cool. So nowadays, tableaufence.com has more than 1,000 pages, and it's being visited from over 135 different countries. And with me today, it's Jackson. Jackson is one of our awesome developers.
All right, thank you, Timo. So my name is Jackson, and I am a developer on the developer platform team. And I was actually the first developer on the team. And since then, we have grown to about a team of 20, and we have shipped countless amazing features and APIs. And a bit more about myself. I graduated from UC Berkeley 3 years ago. So go Bears. OK, all right. Yeah, so I also really love playing ping pong, and that's a picture of me. And actually, one of the main complaints, actually the only complaint that I had when I joined Tableau was that there wasn't a ping pong table. But that has changed a couple of years ago, so now I'm happy. And most importantly, I really love coding. I have worked on the various APIs that we have to offer, including the REST API, the JavaScript API, and the extensions API. And in my free time, I really enjoy using these APIs and JavaScript to build all kinds of fun applications. And I really look forward to showing you some of these applications today. And with that, I hand it back over to Timo.
Thank you, Jackson. So let's have a look at the session flow. That's all the things we want to cover today. We start with level set. We will then see what are the stuff which we will release in some of the next version of our JavaScript API before we are going to jump into many different demos of customers, but also some inspirational demos before we give you some call to actions. I've seen that some of you attended the hackathon at the beginning of the week. So then you're already familiar with that slide, which represents like our developer platform. And today, we really focus on embedded analytics. And behind that, there's actually the JavaScript API as one main component of it. We will not have time to cover REST API, single sign-on, and mobile. But if you're interested in that, there have been sessions happening, and there will be some more. And the slides for these sessions, we will show them at the very end so that you can visit them if that's interesting to you. Very interesting for you to understand. Even though we're making a lot of noise around extensions, you don't need to feel like that the JavaScript API is the old stuff. It's just really solving a different problem. And that's exactly what we're going to have a look at the very beginning. So let's do a little bit of a role play. Let's imagine I would be a sales director. And I'm analyzing like all the different sales my sales reps are potentially going to make this quarter. And the total number of all these different sales amounts is exactly the quota I need to achieve for this quarter. So now, my two top reps are telling me that they're not going to make their numbers. So they will be a little bit behind. Well, that means I can like filter and see what my number will look like, and I need to do the math based on whatever Christine and Gordon are going to make in terms of revenue. Well, but that's of course not smart, and of course it doesn't scale. Because if you're having hundreds of thousands of different sales reps, or just thousands, I mean, you can't calculate that. So probably you or your company, if you're having similar scenarios, you have like some sort of a planning tool. What's the most common planning tool? Excel, that's right. So if I'm now a sales rep and I don't have like a professional planning tool, I'm going to use Excel, and I will do something like this to figure out how close I'm going to get to my number. So something like this. So this is my total, which I need to achieve. And now, well, due to the fact that Gordon is just going to do 20K as well as Christine, I can easily calculate the difference between these two, and then I know like close where I'm going to end up. And then I'm going to copy that back into my analytics tool just to see it on a daily basis. But of course, that's not efficient. And that's exactly where we created extensions for. So now you're seeing a pretty similar dashboard. So you're seeing still all the different sales numbers of my sales guys on the lower left. On the right, I'm already seeing like how much behind Gordon and Christine will be based on the numbers they should achieve. And now I'm seeing directly, well, that I will have a loss of sales, or I will not make my number by 150K. Well, wouldn't it be great if I could just say, well, Dana is going to make a huge enterprise license agreement with, let's say, 500K, and I can directly write that back into my database, and then I immediately see how that impacts my overall result. So now you're seeing like how much revenue you're going to make for this quarter, and that you're like above what you should do. So that's where extensions are made for. So your starting point is a dashboard, you're doing an analysis, and then you want to do something else which you would normally do in a third-party application. So in order to prevent jumping back and forth, you're staying in the flow of work. On the other hand side, let's make up a second scenario where the JavaScript API comes into play. Let's say now I'm a sales rep, and I want to plan which customers I want to visit next. Or I want to visit Lufthansa, but I need to understand what did they buy in the past? When did I visit them the last time? And so I'm logging in to my CRM tool, and I already selected Lufthansa as one of my clients, and I immediately see some details around what has been the products they bought the most, what have been their customer activities. I see all the details, like who visited and what was the topic they talked about. And most of these details are maybe, depending on your CRM tool, customer relationship management tool, familiar and already built in. But some of them are definitely not. So one cool example would be if you want to figure out if you're giving the right discount to your customer. It's a very complex thing, but maybe I just want to get a first overview around the discount I'm giving to Lufthansa versus all the other clients. So what you're seeing here is a price volume analysis. So you have like the average price people are paying on that side, and then the amount of stuff they're buying over there. And what you want to see is something like this hockey stick, right? Which means the more people are buying, the better the price gets, the more discount they get. And in that analysis, I just see that Lufthansa is over here, so they're getting a way better price than all the people up here, so that's fine. So now I can move on or dive deeper into the analysis. And that's exactly where the JavaScript comes into place, right? So your overview page is a third-party application, and the analysis is just a side part of it, right? So that's exactly where the JavaScript API comes into play. Does it make sense? Perfect. Spread the word. So the last thing which I want to do with you together before I hand it back over to Jackson is to embed something like this into an empty application so that you see how to start with it. So therefore, we have that blank web portal. It could be an internal wiki, or it could be an application you're selling to your clients. And what I want to do is I want to take a visualization from Tableau Server and place it into my app. How do you start with things within Tableau you're not aware of it yet? You visit TCE, maybe, but the first way of how I'm starting with new things is just Googling for it, right? So let's search for Tableau JavaScript API, and then I have like tons of material which I can find content within. And like the very first link is bringing you to the online help. And then in the last couple of years, we were also showing like how to start with it. And normally I did that by jumping into the tutorial and then seeing different functions, clicking on buttons, and then adjusting that. And that's perfect. You can still do that. But this year, we also want to show that this entry page is already showing you 4 steps of how you can start with that. Really easy. So without reading like the details of it, let's just walk ourselves through it. So the first thing you need to do is you need to tell your web application where your JavaScript API is. And that's, if you're having an on-premise server, is just your local Tableau server / JavaScript, and so on and so forth, like all the details you're seeing here. The next step is you need to have a div container where you put the visualization into it. Is everybody familiar with like web containers generally? Most of you. For those of you who are not, it's basically just, like I've said, a container, and we will fill it with content. And last, or second last, we need the function which actually calls a URL, right? Every single visualization on server has got a URL, and I just want to embed that. So let's bring in the function. And what it's doing, it's basically called initialize viz, and it's creating a container which is called this container, exactly what we've just been mentioning or creating. And then we need to call the URL of where the of Tableau Server, where the viz is stored in. And so let's adjust that to my own Tableau server. Then it's a view. And your visualization is a placeholder for the workbook name. So I've got a workbook name which is called financial, how is it called, by the way? Financial, do you remember that? Services, let's try that. Financial services. And then the sheet name should just be white. And then At the very end, we need to make sure that this function gets called by something. That can be the initial load of the page, or it can be done via a button, and a button is just more fun, so let's create a button. So a button, and when I'm clicking on it, I want to call exactly this function initialize viz, and let's give it a name like load viz, and then we're closing that button, and we're fine. Did you find any typos? Oh, there's silence. We're still searching for them. Let's see. I'm more scared about the URL of that, so let's see. So I'm calling the function, and here we go with the viz. So just give it a round of applause just to keep you active. There were some Steve Baumers in here, like it. So for those of you who didn't do that at any point in time before, this viz is now still interactive, right? So it's showing the stock price for Tableau over the time, and you can still adjust that. It's still highly active, right? So for example, I could hover over to get like intraday information, or I could change the stock to be Amazon, for example, and then it will just query the new data and bring it to the front end. And one thing I will also not cover today is I'm using a REST API, which is querying that live. If you're interested in that, just reach out to me. Afterwards, it's using a third-party software application. Okay, nevertheless, if you would now sell this to your customers because you're a financial services company, they probably won't like it, right? There's some noise around it, which is not too important. The color coding is not nice, and so that's just not the final stage. So every time you're integrating something into your own application, you should make sure that at the end of the day, it looks like it would be your application. So therefore, let's go back into another application. And at this point in time, I'm not logging in at a CRM application, but I'm going to log in as myself. And at this point in time, you're seeing something pretty similar to before. It's the exact same viz. It's just color-coded a little bit nicer. And on top of that, there's also some stuff around it which has nothing to do with Tableau, which is all the stuff in here. Like the get data, for example, you could take all the data which is in the viz or in the data source below and use it for an application to create like custom filters or whatever it is. You could also like just type in different stock over here and then just fully get rid of that part. And last but not least, there's that cool slider which does something else. Because oftentimes analysis is just relevant to me if I can compare it to something. A little bit like yesterday at the Iron Viz, right, where you could compare like one city to another. If you could compare it to your own, that's where it gets important because you know how the weather is likely in your environment. So now the idea of that was you bought Tableau shares for a certain price, and you want to know, or you're thinking about buying that. So you want to get something like a reference line which shows you, like, well, for example, you bought it for $56, and you want to know how many times this stock has been below, above, or equally the same than this amount of money. And if you adjust that, again, you can see how likely will it be that the price is going up or down, like just as a first like indicator. Cool. I hope you like the look and feel, and that gives you some ideas around how to get started and that you need to modify things before you embed that into your own applications. And with that, I hand it back over to Jackson.
All right, thank you, Timo. So how many of you have actually used the JS API? Oh, wow, a lot of you. OK, then you guys probably know that it's probably been a while since we have made updates to the JS API. But we have been working at the infrastructure for a while, and I'm really excited to finally announce that major upgrades are on the way with version 3 of the JS API. So what does this really mean for you? So with the new version, we'll be adding more APIs to help you save development time and build your applications faster and more efficiently. So as part of version 3, we'll be porting the JS API to a shared platform. So what does this really mean? So as Timo mentioned, there's currently the JS API. There's also the extensions API. And they are kind of like cousins in the sense that they share a lot of the similar functionalities, such as mark selection, filtering, and get data. And as part of the extensions API, we have built a shared platform. And for the Node.js API, we'll be building the Node.js API on top of the same platform. And there are many benefits to this. So first, we'll be moving our internal code base to a much more modern TypeScript code base, which means we'll be able to iterate much faster. And if you're working in TypeScript, we'll be able to provide better support and save you some time to not have to write the type files. And another really important thing is that since now all the feature development is happening at the shared platform, all these fancy features that you see in the extensions API, we can easily make it available in the JavaScript API as well, so you no longer have to wait. And they will also be sharing similar interfaces, which means you can easily share code and port your application from one context to the other. Cool, so in addition to all this infrastructure work, we are also adding a lot of new different APIs. So in version 3, we'll be adding APIs to make it easier for you to build custom dynamic filters. So before we had get data and you're building a custom filter, you might be hard coding some of the filter values in your code. And when the vis changed, you might have to change your code, which is unfortunate. And even with get data, you still have to jump through a few hoops. So first, you have to get the field name from the filter, and then you have to call get underlying data async to get the actual data. You have to grab the column based on the field name, and then finally get the filter domain by parsing the column values. And this is the code I had to write 2 years ago, and I'm really not so proud of it anymore. It's quite a bit of code, and in addition to that, having to call get underlying data async is really inefficient. So in V3, we'll be having a new API that allows you to get back the filter domain in one single call. And that API is filter.getDomainAsync. And that is analogous to clicking on the drop-down menu to get back the list of values that are available for this filter. That API is available for both the categorical domain and the range filters. And this API is really powerful. It just helps you get back all that information in one API call, saving you a lot of development time and making your application much more efficient. So in V3, we'll also be exposing a lot of information about a data source. Basically, anything you want to know about a data source, from fields, connections, to active tables, we'll be able to provide those to you programmatically. So a lot of this might seem a bit boring, but actually a lot of our partners, such as our NLG partners, such as Automated Insights and Narrative Science, they have been taking advantage of this information to build better the report of the data for their clients. So we'll also be adding more improvements to the get data feature. So the get data APIs are part of the JS API. And for those of you who don't know, it's a way to programmatically grab the data that is used in a viz. And it's analogous to right-clicking on a viz and hitting view data and kind of seeing that dialog. So in version 3, we'll be adding this same endpoint for all the data sources, which means you can get back information from each of the individual data source that's used in a worksheet, instead of just the primary data source. And we'll also give it the ability to specify the columns and also sort by the columns. So what does this really mean? I can show you with an example. So suppose, again, I'm a sales director, and I have all this sales data with salesperson and the sales numbers. There's a lot of columns, and there's a lot of rows. There might be tens of thousands of records. And currently, if I want to get the top salesperson by sales number, I would have to get back all that data with get underlying data async and kind of parse that on the client side, which is really inefficient and it takes a lot of work. And in version 3, we'll be giving you the ability to specify all that information, including which columns to return, such as the salesperson and the sales number, and you can specify to sort by the sales number and while getting back the top 5 records. So with one API call, you get back the exact information that you want, giving you much better control over the data. So that's not all. So we'll also be adding a lot more of the toolbar APIs. So here's what the toolbar looks like, and it includes functionalities such as adding alerts, subscribing to a viz, downloading the data, exporting data. So in version 3, we'll be exposing a lot of these functionalities programmatically. So what does this really mean? So imagine you are building a web page for your company. You have you have your own workflow. You spend a lot of time kind of designing it, putting all the nice styles on it, and now it looks really amazing. And now you're saying, OK, I'm ready to bring Tableau into my workflow. So you use the JavaScript API, you embed it, And then you realize the toolbar looks like it doesn't really fit with the other controls on my page. And with these APIs, you can effectively just hide the toolbar and build your own custom controls for the functionalities in the toolbar. You can build 100% custom look and feel that is 100% fitted to your web application. So here's an example of what that looks like. So that's a quick preview of what's to come in version 3. And I think this sums it up pretty well. I really like the hook buster. So I hope you're really excited. I'm super excited for this program. And you should have some burning questions. You should be asking, when is this released? How can I try it out, right? And for that, I encourage you to join our new Tableau developer program. In that program, you'll be able to get early access to the features. And if you think with beta programs you get in early access, you can get even earlier access with some of our alpha builds. And another really important thing is that we'll be giving you a free online site that is fully managed by us, which means you no longer have to download anything or install anything. You can just open up a browser, log in, and start trying out the latest features there is. So I really encourage you to join this new developer program. It's amazing. It's just a really great way to try out new things and just give us feedback. So with that, I give it back to Timo.
Cool. Let's talk about some customer cases. How do customers already leveraging our JavaScript API? One of the clients is Siemens. Siemens is a German conglomerate company which is creating everything from wind turbines, trains, but also hardware and software for energy transmission. So they're a little bit of a similar beast than GE, with roughly 400,000 employees, like more than 80 billion in terms of revenue, and then they're operating in more than 200 different countries. And I want to keep the energy level high because I want to explain like a product where Siemens integrated Tableau in. And the product is called MindSphere, but I'm going to make a really easy to understand example with beer before I then explain what beer has to do with MindSphere. Because there are 3 ways of how you can keep the energy high, right? So the first one is demos, the second one is Steve Ballmer, and the third one is beer. So let's say you are into beer as much as we do. In the past couple of Tableau conferences, we also sometimes provided people with a Tableau beer. And let's say, yes, some of you know, maybe you figured out all the ingredients you need in order to produce that beer by your own. And you do a little bit of research on Tableau Public, and you figure out, oh, in Europe, the market is also really big, so I definitely should create my own company and brew my own beer. But for that, you need to find a machine builder which provides you with the hardware in order to do so. So you find a company called Brewer Machines, and you directly order one of their machines. And you immediately start to brew your own beer, and everything's working fine. Now let's say, at a certain point in time, the machine doesn't work anymore, right? It stops working, you can't produce beer, so you're going to run out of beer and you can't sell it anymore. And of course, that has got a huge impact on your revenue. So you need to go back to brewery machines, you need to ask for services in order to fix it. But what if somebody would prevent that this happens at all? And that's exactly where MindSphere comes into play. So Siemens provides their customers, but also customers from other like machine builder companies. It doesn't need to be necessarily a Siemens hardware you buy, but they provide you with something like a Tableau bridge, right, where you can just take your data from whatever hardware, it can be a single machine or a huge plant, and upload all of that IoT data like pressure, heat, and so on and so forth to their cloud. And then all this data gets stored in a huge data lake within MindSphere, and people can create apps on top of it in order to provide companies like yourself with applications in order to prevent that this is going down, because it will early enough alert you, hey, there's something going wrong, you might want to do this or that, or order services for that problem. The only downside for this scenario is that it requires coding. Like Jackson was saying, I also love coding, but nevertheless, for certain things, you need really the domain expertise in order to help people. And that's exactly where Tableau is really good at, right? You don't need to be an expert in analytics, but you can create visualizations and help other people to understand what you're doing. So that's exactly why they implemented Tableau into MindSphere. So now it's a crucial part of MindSphere, and people who are not into coding can create applications. Now, this is just an example, but if you replace brewer machines with a company called Vinke, it's another European company which creates biomass boilers, where you burn things in order to create energy. And they actually, and then you also replace yourself with many customers of Vinke. And then they put their domain experts together, gave them Tableau. They created dashboards which are relevant to their clients, and then they published them to the MindSphere cloud and provided this to all of their clients, right? And that's exactly the idea of Siemens MindSphere, so that you as a machine builder can, on the one hand side, sell dashboards as an additional service, or that's maybe a unique selling point, right? So to differentiate yourself from other customers. And on top of that, you don't need to be even a machine builder to create these things. It's meant to be something like an app store where you as an expert for whatever domain can create dashboards which are relevant to many people, and you can sell it via that platform. Okay, so we had the beer, we had Vinke. Let's have a look at how one of their visualizations looked like on MindSphere. So when you're logging into MindSphere and you choose some of the visualizations, if you're a Vinke client, you now get access to something like this, right? So you have an overview of things you might want to look into. So let's jump into the wet base analysis, for example. So here you have an overview around like the oxygen wet base distribution. And you see that values should be normalized like this, right? But there are some outliers down here. So you really want to understand when did this happen in order to fix the problem. So therefore, you can simply, I mean, that's not really magic. It's normal Tableau drag and drop, probably not too interesting for you, right? You're more into coding. But you could then see these exact values and when these occurred. And if you're selecting then single values, you directly see the exact details on the right-hand side. And just to show you another example of a dashboard they created and published via MindSphere is that one, where you actually see that the vendor is saying, well, you should run your machines in these 4 different parameters. And if all the values are in between here, then you're perfect, right? That's within limit and all's good. The more values you have outside, this can become a problem. So with the new version of Tableau, you can also like show if you're having many overlappings over here, so that makes the whole visualization even smarter. Okay, so that was Siemens MindSphere. Let me show you one more example of a company which has been a prior startup based out of Germany. It's called MyNotes. And MyNotes is a company out of Berlin, and that's a little bit like the Bay Area in the US, right? That's the startup scene where all the cool kids are and creating awesome apps. And MyNotes is creating these beacon scanners. And not sure if everybody is aware of that, but all the new smartphones nowadays contain a beacon, which is basically a Bluetooth device, but it consumes less energy, and it has got a unique ID on it. So whenever you pass by of one of these beacon scanners, it will recognize, have you already been here? Or is it the first time or the 100th time? Whatever it is. And that opens up like a space of many different scenarios you can think of. And what do you think is the industry which is most interested in that? Retail, exactly. That's their core business, right? So many stores are buying these devices in order to figure out where did people walk through? Where did they spend most of the time? Which path did they take? And also, if you just bypassed like the whole store, how many times did you bypass until there was something in the front window which attracted you in order to optimize the advertisement in front of the store? So it's really, really powerful. And what they're selling is, well, they're leveraging the JavaScript API like Siemens is doing and selling visualizations via their own portal, right? And then you can beautifully see where people are spending most of their time. And of course, you can sell that in many different ways, right? Let's say one basic visualization, one advanced visualization, and maybe also some consultancy to really help to optimize how things are arranged in that building. And probably all of you in the room see the potential for it. And it was not just us seeing the potential, but also another pretty well-known company called Telefonica. And that's where they're not a startup anymore because they got acquired by that telecommunication company. And now they can combine this data from beacons also with data from their telecommunication contracts, which means, well, they know how old people are, gender, in which area they live, and that opens up another space, which is showing retail stores where they should open up their next store because that perfectly fits their target group. Really, really powerful. Let's jump into the very last section of inspiration. So here, I hope that I see a little bit more of these Steve Ballmers again. Let's start with another example of extensions. So therefore, I'm going to show you this beautiful Oktoberfest write-back extension, which I just created like mostly at the hackathon at the beginning of the week. So who of you already attended the Oktoberfest in Germany? Okay. Oh, some of you. That's perfect. So for those of you who didn't, in Germany, people are ordering tickets in March. And you know when the Oktoberfest is, right? It's not a big secret. So it's pretty early. So I thought about doing my own business with, well, if people are realizing, well, they are not going to the Oktoberfest with the full group of these 10 people they originally wanted to go there, I'm going to buy all these tickets which are not being used so that I can resell them. So on the left-hand side, you're seeing all these tents at the Oktoberfest in Munich. There's not just one tent, right? There are many different tents. But it's important to mention that not every tent is as good as the other. They all have different mottos and like different styles. So if you're going there, just let me know and make sure that you're going to the Hackafest set. That's my personal favorite. Oh, I'm running out of energy. That would be the worst. Does that look better? Yeah, that would have been heavy. So now on the right-hand side, you are seeing how the tent looks in the inside. So each and every black box means there are no more seats available. But if there are green spaces, then you're seeing, okay, there's enough space, I could go there. So now you could say, well, I'm at the Oktoberfest with 7 people, so Timo, do you have some tickets for me? And then I could say, well, you could sit at this or at this box, but make sure, and that's why you have the map, is here's the music. So do you want to like more have a conversation, or do you want to go crazy like Steve? So probably you want to go crazy like Steve, so I could say, well, I'm giving you all the 7 tickets, so there won't be tickets available anymore, and then we're sold out for that area. But maybe some other people are giving me like another 5 tickets, not 55, and then I could also write that immediately back, right? So I can stay within the overview of doing things. And that's really a powerful example of combining maps with, like these background images with showing you the details around a certain context. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about is a customer example where a customer created a fair, like internally, where more than 1,000 people came into a single place in Germany. And they were asking us to provide them with an application where people could just come in, register, taking a picture of themselves, and then when you would click on a map on a certain country, that they would see who else is in that country so that they could connect with each other. It was like a networking idea. And I mean, if they would have provided us with the pictures of these people, you could create like shape files within Tableau and then just do your thing in Tableau only. But due to the fact that they were not allowed to give me these pictures, well, that need to happen on the fly. And that's why I created something with the JavaScript API, which I call the Tableau Fans Photo Booth. So what you're seeing here is, on the one hand side, over here, a picture which I can take of myself. In the middle part, you see like the registering area. And on the right-hand side, you're seeing where different people come from, right? So these are all the different departments and how much people come from the very same department, how many people come from the same city in that country, and then also like details around where do people within that country come from. So now let's assume I would get in there and I would take a picture of myself and I would type in all the details about myself and if I'm using Tableau or not, and then let me change that, that number, so I'm thinking that 30 people would attend. And now I would write myself back into the application. You're now seeing that, that I got added immediately to that visualization without really seeing like the change of reloading. And if I now click on Germany, I see all the different people which do come from Germany, which is, like you can see many times, myself. Yeah, well, maybe I should delete some of them, right? But yeah, so therefore, I normally use United Kingdom because then you see colleagues from the United Kingdom and not that often myself. So if you're interested in adjusting that, that's also available on tablofans.com. It comes with, yeah, all the details, explanation. It's pretty easy setup. Yeah, I was presenting that internally to our customer solutions team. And they were like, Timo, that's awesome, but it just solves this problem, right? I was like, no, no, no. It solves way more problems. But just talking about that, it's not that interesting. So therefore, I was creating something new where I need these shorts for. So if you simply change the Tableau photo booth to, again, retail photo booth, you're seeing something which looks similar, but not the same. It's color-coded a little bit different, which makes it, to most of the people, a little bit more attractive than the white one. And now I could like be in a store, or a store owner, and say, I have these beautiful melon shorts, so let me add them to the stock. That worked fine. The only problem is that for each and every product I get, I would need to fill out all these details, right? And that's highly inefficient. And, well, if you can code, of course you want to be efficient. So therefore, I created something like a QR code scanner. So you're seeing that now all these details got filled in automatically, and now I can also submit that, and I would directly see that within there. How do you like that? And just to make sure that you don't think it's a fake, I brought a second shorts with me. Another beautiful one. And I also have the QR code for that. So if I just hold it here, where's my, there you go. It still works. That was just to prove it. And well, I needed to do something meaningful about it. So therefore, I scanned all my hats. I'm really into hats, like you can see. And I have 27 different ones at this point in time. And for example, if I go to the Oktoberfest, I want to make sure that my hat fits to the overall dress. So therefore, I have different things which I can filter on, the color, so that really fits. Or I'm searching for a certain topic. For example, I'm into Jägermeister, another German brand. So if I'm clicking on Jägermeister, I can find Jägermeister hats or hats which are close to look like these hats, which perfectly fit to the Oktoberfest. So definitely make sure when you're coming over, wear one of these hats. Cool. So let's end with some call to actions. All of you should already have installed Tableau Server. You should also have already visualizations on your server. So make sure that you're trying out to integrate, like just like how we've done that, a visualization into your own application. And secondly, color code it, make it look like it would be yours, right? Really adjust that. With that said, we want to make sure that we are getting an even bigger room next year with more nerds in there. So make sure you're doing the right voting on that session so that we're getting a bigger one. And with that said, thank you very much for your patience, and we're now opening up for questions. Switch it. And by the way, like, you will also see like the mobile bootstrap if you're interested in that, or the custom portal, which will cover more of the single sign-on and the mobile part of the embedded API. Are there questions? Yeah.
For the styling, are we able to control the styling from our portal? Through CSS, we get in there, touch color that way.
So that's a great feedback. So the question was for the recording, is it possible to color code it via CSS and so on and so forth? So development is thinking about that since quite a while. So the best way of feeding that back to our development team is if you're going to the labs, like in the large hall, and please push that. Please push that. Because if I'm saying that, it's like, no, you're not a customer. Maybe it's not important. So make sure you're raising that. So even if you're just walking by saying, hey, Timo told me I need to raise that point over here, it's really important to me, that helps us to get the awareness. Because, yes, we should support that.
Any particular lab person you should tell that to?
I think when you're directly coming from the main hall, the first booth is the mobile booth. So yeah, like just tell them or ask for who's mobile. You're mobile, perfect. Please support that. Yeah, perfect.
The update in the API, that could be relying on having the server upgraded to like a more recent version, or are we going to be able to tie into that file without having? Basically, my company runs on 10.5 still.
Yeah, so the question is whether or not the version 3 of the JS API can run on previous versions of server. So it's not something that I can give you a definite answer to. So some of the features would depend on some of the backend platform changes. So those features, if you try to run it on the older servers, it's not going to be there. But I think a majority of them will still work, but they're still kind of in the works. So.
That's kind of what I thought, but that's fine. I'm just supposed to upgrade a couple months. But, you know, the whole having it on an extensions platform and getting those features, you know, look at the market, it's going to be awesome. Because one of the biggest pains is that, you know, it's just been stuck in that time capsule.
Yeah, and also, sorry. So version 2 of the API is still going to be available. We're still going to be supporting version 2 of the API for maybe the next 2 years. So you have time to kind of migrate your applications onto version 3. Yeah.
You're welcome.
Can you lock down which users can make updates and which ones can't in the API? Or
So the question is which users can make updates, and updates you mean like refreshing the
if you're,
viz?
like adding, typing things in, can just anybody that has access to that?
I see. So there are different parts to that. So you can prevent that certain people can write back to an application like fully by just not giving them access to the application itself. And then the second part is around like all these extensions, or also like if you're embedding it into like your application via JavaScript, you control who's able to do what. So via the JavaScript API and the extension API, you can figure out who's actually logged in to the application. And if you prevent them to write it back, that's totally up to you. So 2 parts, right? One is totally controlled by you, and the other one is controlled by Tableau. Yeah.
So when you're embedding a dashboard on a web page, can you resize the dimensions, or you start with how you define it when you create that dashboard?
Not 100% sure if I got that.
So if I have a dashboard that I've created and say, you know, okay, it's exactly this size, and I want to embed that on a page, can I shrink it down, or am I stuck with it?
Yeah. So yes, you can shrink it down. Now it depends on the workbook design itself. So let's say you fixed the size for the dashboard, and now you're embedding it into a mobile-ready application. then of course you will just get like a small part of it because you set like an absolute pixel range. But if you set that automatic, it will shrink it down, and depending on how you designed it, that can look good or bad. I mean, that's basically where then mobile comes into play, if that's also like a relevant thing. Yeah.
When you're making an update there, writing to the database and then calling the database again to refresh the Tableau viz, or just applying it to the Tableau viz until it refreshes the first?
Yeah, so I'm calling the viz one more time. I'm refreshing the data source one more time. The question is if that's automatically or manual. Is that the question, right? So let me just switch back to the application, which was here. So what I'm doing in that example is I'm clicking on a mark, well, then something pops up, I'm writing down a value, and once I'm hitting that, I'm calling a PHP function, which writes back the data, and then I'm refreshing the data source. So the same thing would occur if you would just go back into Tableau and say, please refresh like the whole visualization. So if you're going into whatever visualization, you have that refresh thing over here. If I pause it, right, this is exactly what would happen. It would just be right-click, refresh on the data source itself. That's what I'm calling as a function.
So this would just be a live connection?
Yes, yeah, it's a live connection. And also, like, because that was an important topic yesterday, you most often don't want people to change your operational data. So therefore, the example I'm showing here is, even though I'm writing back data for a certain sales rep, I'm writing that into a MySQL database, which is not where my original data is coming from. And then I'm just blending the result visually, just to make sure that I'm not changing the underlying data. That's most of the time how you want to do it. Yeah, because then you also have a history of what people changed. So over here you're seeing sales rep, commit, and the amount of number. It's just a long list of things I put into the database. So you could also track who did these changes. Okay, if there are no more questions, feel free to reach out to us, and thank you so much one more time.
Thank you.